Hi, everybody. Welcome back to dinanddaf. This is Elana Stein Hain with a little bit of a throat ache. This week, we are going to be talking about teruf da'at. Teruf da'at is literally the scrambling of the mind. And the way that that plays into the daf this week is that on Bava Batra, Kuf Mem Zayin Amud Bet 147b, the Gemara states that a shekhiv meirah, someone who is on their deathbed, is able to effectuate a kinyan, an acquisition, using just amira, using just words, rather than having to do a maseh kinyan, rather than having to do an actual performance of acquisition that would usually be required, whether we're talking about a document, whether we're talking about a physical motion. None of that is needed in the case of a shekhiv meirah. Why? Because we are worried, shemati tarif da'ato alav. We are worried that maybe this person's brain will be scrambled. Now, what does this mean? We are going to look at two explanations of what this means today. And I think both of them are very, to be honest, sensitive in a wonderful way to the fragility of the mind. And to the fragility of the mind, I would say in general, but certainly the fragility of the mind in cases where someone is very ill or someone is in a dangerous situation or someone has gotten older. And I think it's something to appreciate that the concept of teruf da'at would even be a halakhic concern. So I would offer two different approaches to what teruf da'at means. They're connected, they're related, but they essentially come from two different reads of Rishonim on what our worry is with the shekhiv meirah. One read, focuses on mental anguish. And I want to thank my friend Rabbi Jason Weiner, really specializes in this kind of, end of life care, for giving me that terminology of mental anguish. Mental anguish is sometimes exacerbated or caused when someone is in a dangerous situation, a life-threatening situation, a situation that's very fragile, essentially. And mental anguish could actually speed up their health deterioration. That's one direction. Another direction is simply the concern of confusion, that a person might actually just get too confused to be able to effectuate a kinyan properly. And so let's just let them do it be'amira. So we're going to look at each one of these. As I say, they're connected. And what I want to suggest is that the Rishonim's respective read of what we're worried about in the case of the shekhiv meirah here, I think it comes from somewhere. And it comes from Gemaras and it comes from Toseftas. And I want to look at them to give us a little bit of a deeper understanding. Okay, let's share the screen so that we can take a look together. Here we go. Okay, so first we have our Gemara in Bava Batra that I mentioned, and we have the explanation of rabbinic Gershom. What are we worried about? Shemati taref da'ato alav. What are we worried about in terms of a shekhiv meirah, someone on their deathbed, having this teruf hadat? It says, Rabbanan takinu lemevad ko ravate di'ilo mati lemevad shemati taruf da'ato alav machmatzar. The concern is that the rabbis were worried. They decreed that a shekhiv meirah could give a gift with just amira and not anything else, because they just decreed that you should do the will of the shekhiv meirah, because if not, that might lead to major mental anguish on the part of the shekhiv meirah. It could be painful. And the assumption is that if you're creating that pain in the shekhiv meirah, you might even be hastening their death. Okay, now that explanation of rabbinic Gershom, you can actually see supported by the way teruf hadat is used in other Gemaras. So, for example, the Gemara in Moed Katan Daf Vav Amud Bet, 10 Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Chol shemit lo mit, someone who is sick, if their relative died, ein modi'in oto shemit, you don't tell that sick person that their relative died. Shemati taref da'ato alav, lest you cause them teruf hadat, lest you cause them deep anguish. Ve'ein mekarin b'fanav, and you shouldn't tear kriya in front of them. And people extend to this: you shouldn't wear a torn garment in front of them. Umishatkin et hanashim mipanav, and the women who would weep over the dead, you tell them to be quiet, not to do that in front of the dead. Now, we had an interesting, kind of sad experience where my Saba and my aunt died within a period. I don't remember exactly what the period of time was, but there was this whole issue of not wanting one to know that the other was sick, which was really intense. And the issue is we don't want to cause anguish. The assumption is that anguish could actually cause danger. And yeah, I'm going to pause there. There's also Gemara in Shabbos that talks about a woman, a yoledet, right? That says, "Imay tatzricha lener." If it's Shabbos, this is Shabbos daf kuf kaf chet amud bet. If a yoledet on Shabbos needs a light, needs a fire, chaver tamad leket la taner, her friend can light it for her. V'imay tatzricha leshemen, and if she needs oil, chaver ta miviala shemen bayad. Her friend, presumably we're talking about a case where there's a Reshut HaRabim, her friend can bring her shemen on her hand. And if it's not enough on the hand, she can carry it, quote unquote, in her hair. And if she can't get enough, like maspik, she can't get enough with her hair, she can bring it straight out, do hotzah, she can do straight carrying in the Reshut HaRabim with a vessel. Amar Mar, so Mar says, if a woman is in need of a lit fire, this yoledet, her friend can light it for her. Pshita, that's so obvious, right? It was basically in the Mishnah that says, Mechalalin at the Shabbat, you can violate Shabbos for her. So what's the big chiddush here? So if Mar says lo tzricha besuma, we're actually talking about a yoledet who is blind, a woman who's giving birth who's blind. Ma'u detema, what might you have said? Kevan de lo chazia aser, because she's not going to see the light herself. It should be forbidden. Kamash malan, what it teaches you is ituve miyatva data. It is something that will calm her mind. The opposite of teruf hadat. It's something that will calm her mind. Savra, she thinks to herself, because if there's something that needs to be done, her friend will be able to see and help her. So this is the flip side of the coin. The same way we don't tell someone who's a chola about chas v'shalom, the death of a karev of theirs, of a close relationship, even if it means they're not going to be able to do any of the halachot of avelut. The flip side of the coin is you do everything possible to create yishuv hadat, everything possible to create a calm mind for a woman who is in labor, even to the effect of a woman who is blind, who is not going to need the fire herself, but is only going to need the knowledge that somebody else can see and help her. Now, something interesting, and this I'm going to thank Rabbi Jason Wiener also on this, is that you actually find some fascinating examples of this issue of mental anguish, not in halakhic descriptors, but in midrashic explanations or explanations of Torah or Tanakh. So one example is from Kohelet Rabbah 5:6, which I suggest that you read on your own time. But essentially what you have is Chizkiyahu HaMelech is ill, and Yeshayahu comes to him and says, "You're going to die." And Chizkiyahu turns to him and says, "Is this the way you visit the sick? You visit the sick, you're supposed to say, Min hashamayim yirachamu alecha, right? You should get better. And if you're a rofeh, if you're a doctor, you're supposed to come and say, you should eat this or not eat this. But you came to me and just said, I'm going to die." And in fact, Rabbi Wiener said to me that he didn't say to me, he wrote it, that there's a nocebo effect, right? The negative placebo effect, that when you give people negative news about their outcome, how it actually impacts their own ability physically to continue to thrive or to stay static versus the possibility of causing deterioration. There's also, we're in Sefer Breshit. There's also the famous Rashi that we know that why is it that Sarah Imenu's death is juxtaposed to Akedah Yitzchak? Because Lefi Shal Yadin, this is Rashi on Breshit Kaf Gimel Bet, לפי שעל ידי בשורת העקידה שנזדמן בנה לשחיטה וכמעט שלא נשחט, פרחה נשמתה ממנו ומתה. Because she heard that her son was nearly slaughtered, she died, right? This is kind of a teruf hadat, right? It caused her death. And the Ramban, likewise, as we get to the end of Sefer Breshit, the Ramban sort of on the flip side, why is it that Yaakov vayifagli bo, that he sort of had a little bit of a heart palpitation or a heart attack when he heard that Yosef was alive? Because the sudden influx of good news kind of jolted him, and actually gave him a physical reaction, right? So all of this is actually about a sense of anguish that a person might feel, or in the case of Yaakov, a sense of excitement, but sort of kind of shocking situation that actually will impact their physical possibilities. It could hasten a dangerous situation for them. And that is a halakhic concern that we have. So despite the fact that the Gemara had suggested that the Shli Mira maybe could do an acquisition just with Amira because of the Oraita sources, in the end, the Gemara went with the Rabbanan, it's a takkanah because we're worried about teruf. So that's one direction. Another direction that we see in the Rishonim on the question of what are we worried about with the Shli Mira, what do we mean by teruf? It seems like it's the last teruf that you are going to cause anguish, and the person is going to therefore become closer to death and more. Well, this person being on their deathbed, at some point they're not going to be lucid anymore, and you want to do the kinyan quickly before they lose their lucidity, right? So this is the Shita Mekubetzet in the name of the Ra'em, right? The Shita Mekubetzet brings down a lot of different, sort of like an anthology of shitot of opinions. This is the reason why the rabbis gave this takkanah. What we're worried about is before we have a chance to be koneh from this person, from the shekhiv mira, with an actual ma'aseh kinyan, it'll be too late. They won't be lucid anymore, and they won't be able to perform this activity. Now, what's interesting is this incapacitating confusion. I want to be clear, this is not the same as being a shota, right? Being a shota is psychosis. But this kind of conversation about incapacitating confusion does open up the question of where dementia falls in the halachic paradigm. And what I gave on the bottom of the sheet for those who want to look is I gave a few more halachic discussions because my area is Gemara and conceptual, and there are people who really specialize in this. So I offered a few halachic discussions about how mental anguish fits in halachically to be able to see what poskim from the last, 3 centuries have said about this, and also something from Matai, which deals with end of life issues and organ donation, about what dementia is considered within halakha. But as always, I recommend Rav Yoni Rosenzweig's book, Nafshi B'She'elati, which I think might be coming out in English, but I don't remember the name of it, which is sort of a comprehensive guide to mental health and halakha. But either way, this concept of incapacitating confusion, that the worry is that there's going to be incapacitated confusion and we won't be able to get something done. Where does that come from? Well, it's a famous Tosefta. You may not realize how famous it is, but it is famous. The Tosefta in Yoma, Perek Daled, section Yod Daled, mitzvah vidui erev Yom Kippurim vashecha. You're really supposed to do vidui on erev Yom Kippur with nightfall, but we know we actually do vidui. We have an early mincha, and we do vidui on erev Yom Kippur early before we eat Sudam of Seket, sometimes way before we eat Sudam of Seket. So therefore, the Tosefta is going to continue with that. Aval amru chachamim, but the rabbi said, mitvadeh adam, same word, kodem sheyochal vishteh, a person should do vidui before they eat and drink, meaning before they Sudam of Seket, shemati tariv da'ato b'toch achilu shtia, lest their mind gets scrambled in their eating and their drinking. Now, it's interesting. There are different ways that this is explained. Some people explain, I think it's given to Rashi on the Gemara on this, the parallel Gemara to this, that the worry is that the person is going to become shikker, that the person is going to become drunk, and they're not going to be able to do a proper vidui. Some people think that actually this is not talking about Shema Yitarif Dato, it's really Shema Yichanek, lest the person is going to be asphyxiated, choke on their food. Right, but let's say the shikker explanation is certainly a sense of confusion. I also wonder, by the way, just going back to anguish, I kind of wonder if there also might be something to like a person sitting and eating on Erev Yom Kippur thinking, oh my gosh, this is like my Uh, my the decisions for the rest of my year are happening now. I'm like on trial, and that itself might cause them tremendous anguish to not be able to do vidui before they eat and drink. But suffice to say, I'm going to stick with Rashi, saying that a person might become shikr or sort of a little bit unable or confused because it helps us understand where you might get this concept of confusion from. I'll also say there's a Tosefta in Brachot, Perek Gimel, section Daled, which seems to be referencing what we call Arba Nechnusu Pardes. There were four who went into, some sort of mystical orchard, which seems to be some metaphor for a metaphysical understanding of God. And not all of them came out okay. Some of them came out with their minds scrambled. So here we have Ben Aze Omer Kol Nitrafa Dato Mipnei Chachmato Siman Yafelo. It says if a person gets teruf dat because of their wisdom, because of their study, that's a good thing. But nitrafa chachmato mipnei dato siman ralo. But if a person's chachma gets messed up because of their mind, that's a problem, right? So possibly a reference to Arba Nechnusu Pardes and somebody coming out being a little bit mentally confused. But suffice to say, here it seems closer to the mental confusion and incapacitation than it does to the sense of anguish. We are going to have a shorter shiur than usual because of my throat, but suffice it to say, I would say the big concept here is the recognition of the mind and the body connection, the recognition that in order to be there might be a certain physical thing that you may do that may lead you to become mentally confused. And likewise, if you are mentally confused, we are concerned that you won't be able to perform certain physical acts with lucidity. And according to the anguish perspective, the possibility that the anguish that you might feel in your mind, in your heart, could actually physically endanger you. So mind, body together, not mind, body separate. We can wait for mind, body separation until we get to the age of the Rambam. That's for another time. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.